Hello and welcome to the penultimate phase of ReZero's 5th arc. If you're new here, this is an anime-only's first time reading through the novel content, and I give my thoughts on the phase as a whole. When we left off, the fight lineup had been decided, and this phase wastes no time jumping straight into the first of the battles, starting with Reinhard, Subaru, and Emilia versus Regulus. This fight was absolutely insane and lasted quite a long time, but let's start from the beginning. The fight opens up with Reinhard taking Regulus at his word and accepting being executed to let Emilia free from his grasp, but to nobody's surprise, that was a lie. On the flip side, much to Regulus' surprise, Reinhard quite literally rises from the ashes like a phoenix due to yet another divine protection he had pirated online. Reinhard opting to sacrifice himself to get what he wants is quite a strong parallel to Subaru in a lot of ways, especially given that he revived himself. Both Reinhard and Subaru of old are willing to sacrifice themselves to get what they want. This also gives us some very interesting introspection from Subaru, as he has a little monologue wondering if the divine protection of the phoenix makes a mockery of death. There are about 3.5 or 4 chapters of Reinhard just beating the absolute hell out of Regulus as they try to understand what his authority is, and I have to say, it's one of the rawest things I've ever read. Watching a self-deprecating god fight against an incel god was extremely entertaining. Honestly, I was partially worried I wouldn't have much to say about this phase, as multiple chapters in it were just rawness incarnate. That did not end up being the case, however. The choreography we see in the fights present in this phase is spectacular, and is seemingly better than a lot of shonen. You do have to remember that I come from a world of manga, so reading my first web or light novel brings in a lot of bonuses with it. In shonen manga or anime, the fight is already visualized to you, leaving no room for your imagination, so novels can already get away with quite a bit more. I have only 2 criticisms of this phase, and the first one pops up here. The POV swapping from Regulus versus Reinhard and Subaru was some major blue balls. This isn't even a major criticism, it's just that in comparison to the fights going on, they weren't nearly as interesting as this one. So when we swapped to watch Ricardo think he's on the team, it took some of the wind out of my sails. I know they eventually had to cover these fights though, I just wonder if there was better timing for it. Emilia got to display not only her magical competence, but on-the-fly thinking during their fleeing from Regulus. It's also my understanding that her importance in this fight is greatly expanded upon in the light novel, so I'm gonna go ahead and say that my expectation of her coming into her own is quite met in this phase, but there's definitely more to say about her later. In another ironic twist of fate, Regulus seems to hold quite a bit of disdain for Reinhard due to his massive wealth of power, pondering just how much he might have trampled on others due to that strength. This is especially funny when you remember that Regulus is fucking invincible and is the strongest Sin Archbishop. We see that Reinhard is still incapable of drawing his sword, even though Regulus is extremely powerful and at this point had gotten a few major hits in on Reinhard. Previously, my assumption was that Reinhard's sword could only be drawn on massively powerful enemies like Puck. However, the condition of drawing the sword might not be related to power at all, but the person themselves, and Regulus could just be too much of a scumbag for the sword to accept being used against him. While they're trying to crack Regulus' authority, Subaru begins to think back to how they are all named after the stars from Earth, and comes to a conclusion that I had expected when he first mentioned this. The witch cult did not originate from this world. This phase demonstrates quite strongly just how big of a tremendous fuck-up the anime cutting out that other people were isekai'd was. The implication of this is either multiple people were isekai'd and held a connection to a witch similar to Subaru, or perhaps just one, and they based a religious group around that. If I recall correctly, the group was formed around the Witch of Envy as well. For some reason, she might just be capable of bringing people from other worlds to this one. The name Subaru comes from the star custard Pleiades, I don't know how you say that, which in mythology is the 7 divine sisters. How many witches are there, you might ask? Well, definitely 7 if you don't include the ones that represent the old deadly sins. You could trace back quite a few star-related names in ReZero, but Satella is the one that manages to elude me. If you crack her name, you probably crack the biggest mystery of ReZero. Maybe I'll be able to put something together as time goes and I read more. We POV swap to the Alfred versus Julius and Ricardo fight, to which we learn that Ricardo really is not that guy, as he gets the absolute shit kicked out of him. And we learn that gluttony has absorbed Julius's brother's memories. We then POV swap again and see the other gluttony, Baten Kaitos. We learn that Kiritaka is alive, as I had predicted, but if he's a traitor or not is still unclear, as he actually helps Otto quite a bit here. The name Alfred is a reference to the heart of the Hydra, and the name Baten Kaitos I'm unsure of as of now. And then we hear a third name, Lewis. I don't remember ever hearing the name in this series. Is there a third gluttony, or is this referring to somebody else? If I'm just misremembering, please do let me know. The expectation of gluttony absorbing much more than just memories is also made, as Baten Kaitos is jumping for joy after hearing Subaru or his hero's speech over the microphone. If you remember, this was the gluttony that had eaten Rem's name in memories. It seems there is still a bit of her kicking inside of this Archbishop. Another cool thing is that we get some more details about the nations and political info about them during Garfield's fight with Kurgan. I don't know how you say it. Wallachia, for example, is more or less the only nation that doesn't care about your physical birth characteristics, while Lagunica still racially discriminates and Gesteco bans foreigners. While that sounds nice, Wallachia, again sorry for the fucked up pronunciation, is also essentially a fascist-sounding nation where power reigns supreme, which is why they don't really care about race. This fight is overall a great moment for Garfield, who earlier in this arc was destroyed by Reinhard, and has to grapple with being destroyed again and again and again and again. He thought he was the strongest back in the sanctuary, but now that he's out in the real world and is taking L after L, it hurts his pride, and it makes him feel weak and inferior. This wells up so much that it leads to him considering just giving up and allowing Kurgan to kill him. When we cut back to the climax of Regulus versus Subaru and Emilia, we get some amazing content. First of all, we basically come to understand just how complex Regulus' authority is. Stillness of an object's time. This is a very complex ability, but I'll try and explain it. Essentially, Regulus is capable of stopping the flow of time of anything, including things he touches or even something as simple as his own breath, which doesn't allow any interference with the object from the outside. For example, Regulus' signature move of kicking up dirt and rocks sends an object stopped in time forward towards an enemy, and as nobody but Regulus can interfere with the frozen object, it simply cuts through the opponent, leaving them full of holes. This also allows him to use it on other people to be entirely stopped in time, making it so no outside interference can happen to them, meaning no damage. We see him use this on Emilia when Sirius is blowing a bunch of fire. What's interesting about witch factors and their authorities is that we know that these are passed down for who knows how long, yet all of their names happen to line up with their abilities. Regulus in particular was very specific to the Little King. Does that mean that it's safe to infer that the names of the archbishops are also passed down? Something interesting to think about for the future. Not only is Arc 5 a testament to how far Subaru has come, but now we can view it as how far Emilia has come. She has no hesitation in owning her heritage or physical characteristics, and just like Subaru in Arc 1, displays selfishness and asks for just a name. This then segues into us learning about a secondary power to Regulus' authority, Lion's Heart. This power allows him to freeze his heart in time, much like his stillness power, granting him invincibility by being stuck in time. This allowed him to not eat or drink, take damage, and as well as ignoring every physical law. Technically, this ability has a limit to around 5 to 10 seconds before he would die from heart failure. But this is where Regulus' wives come into play. He had fused his heart with all of his wives' hearts, using their heartbeat to keep him alive, while being able to consistently use the invincibility. Emilia used some lesser spirits to crack this part of Regulus' ability, and the wives understood what they had to do to stop Regulus. They all opted to kill themselves to stop their hearts and nullify his ability. But in an act of mercy, Emilia froze the entire church to stop their hearts and make their death painless. This leads to the final confrontation between Emilia, Subaru, and Regulus, in which Emilia is enraged at what Regulus made her do, and then we get the grand reveal that it didn't work. The entire church is dead and Regulus still has his ability, simply because he had placed his lion's heart inside of Emilia as well. Emilia puts her full trust in Subaru as he finally relies on a great power that resides within him. In essentially an act of revenge for the long-dead Betelgeuse, Subaru unleashes the unseen hand against Regulus once again. If we jump back to the roundtable discussion last phase, Subaru notes how downright evil and destructive the powers of the archbishops are, but could they possibly be used to save? It's not the power that's inherently flawed, but the people themselves that are evil. Subaru uses the power of the unseen hand to save Emilia and grab the heart inside of her. Also similar to the catastrophic loop we saw in Arc 3, finally giving Betelgeuse his final opportunity to save Emilia after his demise. Finally, after getting his ass absolutely kicked for 3.5 chapters, Regulus is defeated. And wow, what a character he was. Regulus was almost doomed from the start to be an average person who strived to be above average. He considered himself the most satisfied existence in the world, considering himself to be doing well and always above others. There was never an exceptional thing about him, in reality. He was born into poverty, probably the average occurrence in this world, much like our own, with an absolutely average physical appearance with nothing to stand out about him. What differs is his immense inferiority complex and ego, which leads to him viewing the kindness of his family and village folk as pity, or that he's being looked down upon. He grew up believing that everyone was against him for being so exceptional, and grew into a man-child who killed or maimed everything that irritated him. He wants to be remembered, to be viewed as how great he thinks of himself, but has a short fuse and tendency to feel as if he's being infringed upon due to his complex. What makes it all the more ironic is that in his death, Emilia does not even remember him, despite him wanting her to hate him forever. In a desperate dick measuring contest to not be pitied, he ends up being exactly that. Regulus wanted to go out with a bang, but went out with quite a literal whimper. After the battle, Subaru finally gets to sit down and just do nothing. For the first time, Subaru gets to have faith that his comrades enlisted in this fight and will take care of their end of the deal instead of rushing towards the next fight. For the first time, he's finally feeling the load off of his shoulders. He's spent and gets some well-earned rest until he feels the fusing of yet another witch factor into his body. This is where my second criticism of this phase comes, which is when all of the wives just make it out fine. I personally think that keeping the wives dead in the church would have been more impactful and made the finale of the Regulus fight all that more intense. I logically understand why they survived, because there is precedent for surviving being broken out of ice. I just wish that they hadn't. I spoke earlier about how sacrifices must be made in Arc 5, and I felt that the church demonstrated that exactly. It would have driven home that you can't always win if 53 innocent people died to stop Regulus. The phase closes out with Capella ending up in a fight with somebody extremely unexpected. Ow! I thought he was supposed to go fight Sirius with Priscilla and Liliana, what is he possibly doing here? We got all of the extrapolation I could have dreamed of for Regulus, so I'm ready for some OW content. There aren't too many light novel changes that I'm aware of, but from what I've been told, there isn't an official English translation for this volume yet, so there could be more that I'm unaware of. Number 1 is that Priscilla in Liliana vs. Wrath actually begins in this phase instead of not being mentioned. Number 2 is that Emilia played a much bigger role in helping Subaru recognize Regulus' weakness in the light novel. And finally, number 3, Emilia hit Regulus 53 times for each dead wife before Reinhard arrived and basically killed him. For the quick review, I absolutely loved this phase. I usually read about 2 chapters a day when I am reading, but for this one, I read it all in 2 days. It all flowed so well and was an absolutely amazing climax of the arc. Regulus is one of the best characters in the series, flat out. I absolutely love everything about him. Shame he's dead, but you know, the series making the act of being isekai such a big deal in itself is awesome. You know, it could have just been Subaru came to this world and that was it, but instead you got Ao, you know, you got Flugel, you got Hoshin. It just feels like such a big deal, and especially now that we know that the witch cult probably has some origins in the real world, it feels like a massive deal, and I think that's awesome. The creativity of the powers in this series is really cool. Stillness of an object's time is really fucking neat, and I'm a big fan of it. Betelgeuse's unofficial revenge against Regulus was a beautiful scene. Genuinely loved that chapter. Getting to watch Reinhard in full display was something awesome to witness. And finally, this isn't actually a point, I just wanted to put this out there, that watching Ricardo get his ass absolutely kicked immediately was really funny to me. The only 2 negative things are things that I've already discussed, but I'll just recap them briefly. Number 1, the pacing was more or less great, but sometimes when we POV swapped, it felt like the brakes were being slammed and I was flying out the windshield. It's not really a major deal, it's just kind of the consequence of having such a big, you know, expected fight and then having some not so interesting ones. I personally feel that the wives in the church actually dying would have been more impactful, and I would have enjoyed the thematic relevance of that more. Maybe there will be something later on that makes this actually a really interesting decision, so I'll wait a little bit. Let's get to what everyone's waiting for, my expectations for the arc or series as a whole. For number 1, Subaru will fall pretty far mentally. He's actually doing great. I got cooked on this one, but the arc's not over yet, so just hold out for one more phase. Number 2 is Emilia will get to do something that makes her stand out. I'm gonna go ahead and mark this one off. I think her further involvement in the light novel, as well as her moments in the church, were absolutely stellar for her character. Number 3, cool Subaru action scene. This is still only a halfer. Subaru is doomed to be a loser for the rest of his life, I fear. The unseen hand scene was really cool, but I wanted, you know, Subaru to be raw. He probably just won't ever be raw, and I'm okay with that as well. That's fine. Number 4, Garfield's mother and gluttony. Still obviously no updates on this one. Number 5, Arc 5 will be a tragic arc. The church scene shows that maybe this wasn't true, but hey, we still got a phase left to go. Number 6, Kiritaka is not dead. He is alive and reintroduced in the least climactic way possible, but yeah, he's alive. No signs of being a traitor yet though. Number 7, there is a traitor. No updates on this one yet. I could just be pulling this out my ass. For new expectations, I don't really have that many. I'm not gonna lie to you. I almost thought that I would barely be able to make a video out of this phase. I was able to draw a lot of meaning from Regulus at least. Number 1, there is a much deeper thing going on with Ao. His similarities to Subaru and now his sudden appearance with Capella tells me something is very wrong here. Don't even get me started on the conversational mirror. I just remembered that. It's not even in the script. I don't know how I forgot about that. And number 2, this one's a bit further out there. It's mostly just speculation, but I wonder if Subaru was brought to this world to absorb all of the witch factors so that they can be placed in a single person. This idea would be similar to Yuji's role in Jujutsu Kaisen, absorbing all of Sukuna's fingers to get them out of other people's hands. What this means beyond that, I'm unsure of. This is just kind of wild speculation, something to think about that might be interesting for you guys. And that's the end of Phase 4. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Sorry if it seems kind of light. I don't know how long this video is going to be. I'm just recording right now. If you like this video, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe for the funny YouTube algorithm. Yeah, you can go down in the description below and follow me on Twitter, where I'm always 100% correct about everything I've ever posted. You can also join my Discord, which is also in the description. We talk about My Hero Academia, Jujutsu Kaisen, ReZero, and I also do live reads. Like when I'm reading the phase, I will post my thoughts there as I'm going. And this is a kind of a side announcement. I'm thinking about for the last 2 chapters of Arc 5, I might stream my live read so you guys can see my reaction to the end of the arc live. If you guys are interested in that, please comment down below and tell me if there's any interest in that so I know I can do it. That's all. Thank you.